Last week we celebrated in the liturgy the memorial of St. Augustine. And I want to talk to you today a little bit about St. Augustine. You know, it was 40 years ago that I was sent to Rome for studies and to study the patristics, the theology of the early centuries of the church. And I lived with an old monk there who was a great scholar in this field. His name was Father Basil Studer, and he befriended me as a young protege, really, and we used to walk through the city of Rome on Sunday afternoons, and all he could talk about was either Origen, the great 2nd, 3rd century theologian, or Augustine from the 4th and 5th centuries. And I remember him saying early on in those conversations, Augustine, he's my friend. And I could really tell that he was completely absorbed with the thought of this man, and he passed some of that on to me. I very much appreciate St. Augustine, and I was remembering all that in these days. Probably the most accessible work of St. Augustine is his Confessions. At least it's the most famous, and probably some of you have read those, at least in part. The word confession can throw us off because we think, oh, Augustine tells all, you know, the Confessions of St. Augustine. But what the word confession, or confess, the verb, means in the Latin is a broader sense. It means stating my faith about my life, stating my faith about my life. And so I confess my faith, like we say it in the Creed. I confess one faith, one baptism for the forgiveness of sins. Anyhow, so the Confessions of St. Augustine are him stating his faith about his own life. But the remarkable thing about the writing is that he's not addressing an audience. He's not addressing a reader. The whole thing, from start to finish, is addressed to God. It's a prayer. And that's not like a literary pose. No. He's writing his prayer, and he's letting us watch him pray. This is what's so extraordinary about the work. And what he's praying about, what he's confessing, is how he sees that the story of his life has converged with the story of the Bible. And the big patterns of the Bible are these: creation, the fall into sin, and then the redemption, the lifting up of creation again. But that is not just the Bible story, that is every Christian story. And so Augustine, in fact, models for us how to do that. I have a page from the Confessions in my pocket, and I just want to read you one example of that, and to see how Augustine uses these biblical patterns to understand his own life. And of course I'm sharing that with you because we can do the same. Here's what he says. Late have I loved you, O beauty so ancient and so new. Late have I loved you. You. He's talking to God, remember. So how does he name God here? He calls God, O beauty. O beauty ever ancient, ever new. And he says, late have I loved you. He's thinking about his life, and he says, man, it's taken me a long time to get around to loving you, God. And I'm sorry about that. He continues this way. Lo, you were within, but I was outside, seeking outside for you. Think about that. This is huge. He says, he's addressing God. God, you were within me, but I was elsewhere. God was with me, but I wasn't with myself and with God. This is huge. Lo, you were within, but I outside, seeking for you there. And upon the shapely things you have made, I rushed headlong, I misshapen. He's talking about how he lived in the world. And he saw that the world was beautiful, and he calls it shapely things out there. But I was misshapen. So I couldn't understand the beautiful things that God had made. Now here comes an amazing part. He names the 5 senses. He says, you were with me, but I was not with you. And then he confesses how God was with him. Watch him list the 5 senses. You called, shouted, broke through my deafness. That's the ears. You flared, blazed, banished my blindness. The eyes. You lavished your fragrance. I gasped, and now I pant for you. What you smell. Then I tasted you. The taste is beautiful. I tasted you, and I hunger and thirst for more. You touched me, and I burned for your peace. What Augustine is confessing here is that he sees in his life God has approached him through all 5 of his senses. And he says, where was I? Late have I loved you, O beauty, ever ancient, ever new. Dear friends, what a way for us to pray too. And maybe especially in these times of turmoil and tension and fear and national strife. You know, we need to come back to ourselves where God is, and where all 5 of the senses are what God is using to address us. Listen to it again. All 5 of the senses, God is addressing you. O beauty, you called, shouted, broke through my deafness. You flared, blazed, banished my blindness. You lavished your fragrance. I gasped, and now I pant for you. I tasted you, and I hunger and thirst. You touched me, and I burned for your peace. Be well, dear friends.